In our last video, I covered the basics of watercolor, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make something out of these steps with watercolor. So the first thing we're going to do, move this out of the way, get a fresh piece of paper, and as you can see, we have exactly the same setup we had before, the same watercolor brushes, the same palette, we even have the same water, which I would recommend you get clean water for this, but for this purpose, it won't matter since we're going to be using about the same colors anyway. And paper. Make sure you have art paper. Paper towels are also important. Okay, so once we have all of that, we are ready to begin our watercolor painting. Make sure that your brush is completely clean. And the first technique that we're going to do, we are going to go and we are going to do a little bit of wet on wet. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to map this out right here. And you won't be able to see this on the screen, but let me see if I can tilt it a little bit. You can kind of see the water reflection there. What we're going to be making, we are going to end up making a sunflower. And the first step you want to do is make the petals. And I'm going to only be making 4 of the petals. So as you can see right here, we have 4 of the petals. You can barely see it, and they're facing off in the cardinal directions, so north, south, east, and west. I'm going to go into some yellow, and this is just going to be straight yellow. I got a little bit of water on it. I'm rolling my brush around, and then I'm going to go into the colors that we have here, wet on wet, and plop these colors down. And I'm going to pick up quite a bit of pigment because I want this to stay in there pretty well. So wet your brush multiple times if you need to, pick up some pigment, and you can go right into your painting. Now, something to know about watercolor, it's not going to look like anything until much later because you have to build up colors. Unlike oils or acrylics, that the colors are basically there from the beginning and you can see it, watercolor is much different. So now that we have the yellow down, I'm going to go into a little bit of brown. I'm going to add that in right around in here. And I'm just going to kind of go around where I think some shadows need to be in the petals. Kind of like that. Get some more water on there and I can dampen these up. And just a little bit more yellow. Really make this stand out. Okay, next I'm going to do the same thing, except now I'm going in between these petals. So start off with some water, go in between the petals. And you're going to notice some bleed out into the other petals. That's perfectly fine. And we're going to do the same thing again. So a little bit of water in with your yellow. This time I'm going to go in with a little bit of orange into it. So yellow, brown, and orange is what we're working with. And just a little bit, not much. Go back into the yellow again, same thing we did before. Really brighten that up. Okay, and then we are going to do the same thing again, going in between them one more time. But this time I'm going to try to not connect the water together. So where the petals are at, I'm going to try to keep a little bit of a dry area in between them. That way the colors do not bleed out. And we can go back and fix it later once it dries. And I am just going in and adding in some lines in between here. Like that. Okay, so once we have that done, yellow, let's go in, fill those in like that. Now with those petals that we just added in, let's go into some brown and we will just add that in right at the peak where it comes out from the other petals. A little bit of yellow in there again. Really brighten those colors up. Okay, and now for the center. The center, we're going to go into some browns, and I'm actually going to mix that with a little bit of black, just a touch to make it dark. So I'm just rolling my paintbrush around, picking up some of that pigment and mixing it in with the brown. You know what? Let's add in just a little bit of blue too. There, that gives us a nice dark kind of gray color. A little bit of warmth to it. Okay, now I'm going to go in right in the center and we're going to kind of swirl that around like that. And if it goes out, that's okay. There we go. And we're going to add some water to this and branch it out a little bit into the petals. Add in some browns, just here and there. And just a touch of black. And I know this doesn't look like much right now because it's getting a little bit muddy. That's okay. It's the water mixing with the pigments, and it will even itself out once it dries. So for the time being, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in a little bit of this leftover color that I have on my brush on these petals in the background to kind of make them look like they're in shadow, stand out just a little bit more. Just little lines. And add in a little bit more brown to it. I'm actually going to take some brown and mix a little bit of red. Add those in right around there. All right, now while we are waiting on all this to dry so we can go back over it with another coat, let's go ahead and start making the color for the stem. And the stem is not just straight green as most people would think. If you just put straight green down, it's going to look very artificial. So what you want to do is you want to get a healthy amount of the pigment over here. So roll your brush around in it and get a good amount of the pigment. And then we're going to add just a touch of brown. And this is going to make it look like a forest green. And you're going to need more green than brown. Otherwise, it's just going to look like mud. So let's scoop some more green off right here. Put it over here. And as you can see, we're already starting to get that kind of green that we're looking for. Let's get a little bit more green in it. Okay, now that's the kind of green that we're looking for. And this, whenever it goes down, we want to try to stay away from the areas that are wet. And a good way to test this is to put the back side of your hand down on the paper. And if it feels like that it is cold or wet, it's still kind of wet. You need to wait for it to dry. So don't touch any areas that are cold or wet. We're going to do dry on wet right here, or wet on dry, however you'd like to say that. And we are going to just add in the stem going down like this. And we will go back and add in the stem closer to the flower petals once it gets completely dried. But for now, it's going to go down like that. And the stem on sunflowers are pretty beefy. Maybe not quite that beefy that I made it, but it is pretty beefy. And if you're careful, you can actually go around these, but you just have to be careful with it. Now, it's been a very long time since I actually seen a sunflower, so I don't really remember what the petals look like, but you know what? This will be close enough. Close enough to get the point across. Okay. Now with the stem, if we want to add in some details, we can just go in with some browns where we think the shadows are going to be. We can also add in some yellows to heighten up some of those colors, which we're going to need some yellows up the top anyway. And let's go in to some more yellows for the petals, because we really want those to stand out now. More yellow there, some yellow up here. What I'm doing, I'm going in with more pigment and just going around those petals so we can see the main petals that we have. Right now I'm just adding in the colors where I think I need them. Just random ones throughout. And now for the final touches on the center. So as you can see, we already have some colors on there. We're just going to go into a little bit more black, wet it down just a little bit, not much. And then we can go in and start dabbing these in there again. And this is halfway dry. It's not quite dry yet. But sunflowers obviously have sunflower seeds and they look like little dots. So let's just add those in. So that's all we're doing. We're just loading up some paint and just barely tapping it in there to create those little seed effects. And there we have our sunflower painting. You could always go back in and add a little bit more detail if you wanted to, but for the most part, this is done.